Chag Urim Sameach, Hannukah Sameach. For the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about the miracle of Hanukkah. Or is it the miracles of Hanukkah? Or is it about miracles and Hanukkah? Let's start with the Gemara. There's a famous Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, in the Tractate of Shabbat, that asks the question, "My Hanukkah? What is Hanukkah?" At least that's the simple way to understand the question. What is Hanukkah? And the Gemara answers, on the 25th day of Kislev, I'm going to read most of the sources in English. On the 25th day of Kislev, there are 8 days of Hanukkah. You can't eulogize, you can't fast on them. Why? Now we get the story. When the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary. And when the Hasmonean monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious over them, they searched and found only one cruse of oil that was placed with the seal of the high priest. And there was only enough oil to light one day. To light the oil for the menorah needed to be pure oil, stamped by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and they only had one. A miracle occurred and it lasted for 8 days. So the next day, they made a holiday that these would be 8 days of Hallel and Hodayah. These would be 8 days of praise and thanksgiving. Okay, in a minute we're going to look at two different approaches to understand the Gemara, but at least let's just place the facts on the ground. The Gemara asks the question, what is Hanukkah? And it doesn't give much historical context. It doesn't give much story of the fact that the Greeks came or the fact that they tried to stop people being Jewish. It doesn't talk about really what it means that there was a huge war. Right? It's a glaring omission from the Gemara. But it doesn't mention the war. It doesn't mention this famous story that a very small army defeated a very big army. And all of that means the Gemara doesn't engage with that question at all. It simply directly gets to what is Hanukkah, and it says that we found one small jug of oil and it lasted 8 days. I'll put a parenthesis, that's a very deep, interesting idea. What does it mean that sometimes you only have a little bit left in the tank, but it does eightfold what you could have imagined? But I'm going to put that aside for the moment. Okay. So the Gemara asks, what is Hanukkah? Answer, Hanukkah is 8 days in which we praise the fact that we had one jug of oil that lasted 8 days. Okay. Now I'm going to go off of the Gemara, and this is largely inspired by a essay by the late Rav Shagar in his book to illuminate the openings, and an essay called Publicizing the Miracle, a lesson on the miracles in the Rambam. So what it means to Lefarsem et Hanes, what it means to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah. Okay. So let's go in two directions. First, I want to go in a direction that's largely assumed. And let's get these ideas first from two directions, right? There are two big traditions that opened up historically, the Ashkenazi tradition and the Sephardi tradition. So let's take one opinion from each of those. Rashi, the most famous commentator on the Gemara, asks the question, or rather explains the question, my Hanukkah. Not as I defined it earlier, what is Hanukkah, but on which miracle was Hanukkah established? Why do we have a holiday? Now, it's important to point out that the question on which miracle assumes there are multiple miracles, one of which is the one on which Hanukkah was established. And now, if that's the case, maybe it makes sense why the Great War was not mentioned. While it may be the case that Rashi acknowledges the fact implicitly that a small group defeating a big group was in and of itself a miracle, it doesn't need to be mentioned. The question is, on which miracle is there Hanukkah? The answer, it is on the supernatural miracle that one jug of oil lasted 8 days. And then Rashi says, makes very clear, even though they're called Yamim Tovim B'Halel V'Hoda'ah, Yontif, it sounds like, holidays of praising and thanksgiving, Rashi clarifies, Melacha, that which you can't do on Shabbat and Yontif, is not prohibited. You are decidedly allowed to do those things. Rather, there are days to say Hallel. So indeed, for 8 days we sing Hallel. Ideally, we're dancing as we sing it. And we say Al Nisim. Right? Al Nisim is a paragraph that was composed that we say specifically, where it's called Thanksgiving, So Al Hanisim is a paragraph that we say when we do Thanksgiving, which is namely in the Amidah, and when we say Birkat Hamazon, right? When we're in our silent Amidah, at the end there's a paragraph of Thanksgiving, and that's where we insert Al Hanisim. You might notice Al Hanisim starts when you say at this Chanukah, Ve'al Hanisim, because it's saying thank you for all the things I just said thank you for in the prayer of Modim, and on the following things. And the same thing in the second paragraph, Nodeh Lecha in Birkat Hamazon. That's where we insert it. Okay. So I once had a friend who said that Hanukkah is maybe like Mincha, the middle prayer of the day. You open your day with Shacharit. Maybe it's about how you're putting on your lens, how you want to see the world. You want to begin with thankfulness. You want to remember that God is orchestrating the whole story. And you end your day with Mariv. You reflect on your day. You reflect at least on your solar day, which just ended, and you get ready for the lunar day, which is about to start. Right? But the point is, it brackets your day. You start and you end. But Mincha is you need to find a time in the middle of the day for it to stop for 15 minutes. It's a totally different experience. And whereas Sukkot or Pesach are these times where the whole world stops and you enter a different dimension of time called Yantif, Chanukah is actually where you have gratitude, and you have to find, you can just light Hanukkah candles, light a match, light a candle, and go on your merry way. But there's an idea to sit and contemplate, to be by the candles for 30 minutes. You have to create an opening within your day, just like within the day. You have to some time before sunset find time to stop for 15 minutes. Let's do the same thing on Hanukkah. You have to find amidst the rain that you're going to work probably on Hanukkah, and you need to stop and create an opening. Why, says Rashi, to remember a supernatural miracle that happened. So of course now we'd ask the question, why is it so important to remember a supernatural miracle that happened? I'm not going to offer an answer right now, but I am going to acknowledge that we're acknowledging a supernatural miracle that happened. Okay, that's Rashi, the Ashkenazi tradition. Now there's the Rif, a famous Sephardi commentator, and he says something very similar. He says, we bless, for the miracle that was 8 days long. I'll read it inside. The next year, the sages instituted those days and made them holidays for Hallel and Thanksgiving. And therefore, we bless on the miracle each and every day of Hanukkah, since on each and every day, the miracle was renewed with the same jug of oil. The famous question, why are there 8 days of Hanukkah? Because it lasted 8 days. You can maybe ask the question, well, wasn't only a miracle for 7 days because it lasted 7 extra days? But nonetheless, Rif is saying something interesting, which is at least saying there were 8 supernatural miracles that happened, and we need to acknowledge each and every one of them. Or even if you want to say that it was one long supernatural miracle, we need to acknowledge its presence on each and every day of those days. It happened for 8 days. We need to remember it for 8 days. And I'll just now tie this first approach together. The Rashi and the Rif come together in the Torah, who is somebody who was a gatherer of early opinions and was a precursor for the Shulchan Aruch, the magnum opus of halachic rulings. And what does he say? First, he quotes the Gemara almost verbatim, and then he says, and therefore, from then on, are holidays of Hallel and Thanksgiving. What does that mean? He explains it. This is the halacha that we follow. You need to say Hallel, and you need to say Al Hanisim, but you can do Melacha. Okay? And then he brings something interesting, which I'll just close it up. He brings a different, earlier halachic authority, the Ram Rottenberg. And he points out the fact that we have these huge parties, right? The fact that we have jelly donuts because of oil, right? And the fact that we get together and have really fun things. I just want to make clear, those are not obligatory. They're permissible and they're fun and they're encouraged, but they're not obligatory. Why? Because this is a holiday for Hallel and Hodayah. This is not a holiday for Simcha and Mishteh. This is not a holiday for festive meals. Now, I'll tangent for a minute that the Haffetz Chaim in the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Levush, who says, other commentaries that basically say, there are 2 main rabbinic holidays, right? I'll just quickly give a quick background. There are 3. When we say Chag Sameach, it usually actually refers specifically to 3 holidays. Specifically, the 3 holidays where you would do an Aliyah L'Rega, where you historically go to Jerusalem. They are Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. Those are the 3 Chagim. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur aren't exactly Chagim in the same sense. Right? What's our year? There's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then there's those 3 Chagim. Then there are 2 rabbinic holidays that come after the Torah, which are specifically Purim and Hanukkah. And there it's very interesting. Purim, as you know, there's a huge mitzvah to drink and to be festive and to feed yourself and to have a big joyous party. And the Mishnah Berurah, that's the Haffetz Chaim, writes, the mitzvah on Purim is a physical mitzvah because in that time, Haman wanted to kill us. They want to destroy our bodies, and our body is still here. Decidedly distinct from Chanukah. The Greeks didn't want to kill us. The Greeks wanted us to stop being Jewish. And therefore, the focus of Hanukkah is actually not about anything physical. You can do physical things. Have a party, says the Rambam. Absolutely, it's a great thing to do. But I just want to make clear that that's not the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is not on your body. The mitzvah is on your soul. The mitzvah is to remember that you're still a Jew. The mitzvah is to be Jewish and to inhabit your Jewishness, which is what the Greeks didn't want us to do, which is what the Gemara doesn't mention, that the Greeks came in and they said you can't do, right? Why do we have dreidels? Because they had to hide in the caves when they learned Torah, and then when they would come by and they were learning Torah, they would spin the dreidel to pretend that's what they were doing. They didn't want to kill us. They just wanted to stop learning Torah. Which, by the way, maybe connects beautifully back to the Gemara. And the Gemara says, what does it mean that one little jug lasted 8 days? That every Jew, no matter where you are, no matter when the Greeks or Greek culture comes to get you, there's a little bit of a flame or a little bit of an oil for a flame within you, and a miracle can happen that can be eightfold. Which, by the way, is incredibly relevant right now when we talk about the rampant anti-Semitism in society. And the truth is the current iteration of society is not coming after our bodies, at least if we exclude Hamas at the moment, right? And Iran and its proxies. But the globally, anti-Semitism is actually coming after our Jewishness. Fine, you can be alive, right? But don't express your Jewishness. Hide that. And the Hanukkah is maybe specifically a holiday about that, says the Rambam. It's about saying, no, I will be Jewish, and you can't stop me from being Jewish. And Hanukkah is a celebration of our Jewishness. Hanukkah is it's not Yom Tov. It's not where you stop and you be a distinct person in your shtetl. It's where maybe you can be part of the greater society, but you stop and you make room for a 30-minute window where you sit by the candles and you do something Jewish. And who knows, one day if candles can light a flame, listening to this one YouTube video maybe can have eightfold effect, doing whatever one thing you do as a Jew. Okay, but that's a bit of a digression. So now if I summarize this first approach to the Gemara points out on which miracle, seeming to imply there was another miracle, but on which miracle was it? It was the miracle of the supernatural eightfold lasting of a jug of oil. And therefore, Hanukkah is about, they tried to destroy our spirits and they couldn't, so we do something spiritual by singing and praising and praying, but they couldn't do it. And there maybe honestly there's a miracle, now that I think about it, was not only that it lasts 8 days, but that there even was one jug of oil that was not destroyed, that there's always a little flame left. It never can be extinguished. The Jewish flame can never be extinguished. But the miracle is the supernatural, that the flame can never be extinguished. There's always a little bit of oil left in the tank, and then it can last eightfold. And that was a miracle that happened, and we need to remember that miracle happened, maybe to gain inspiration that something so supernatural could happen again. Okay. But now I want to go into Rambam, and I want to understand Rambam through the eyes of how I understand Rav Shagar's understanding of Rambam. Rambam tells the story, and he tells the story differently. Let's look inside. In the end of the Second Temple, the Greek kingdom issued decrees against the Jewish people, attempting to nullify their faith and refusing to allow them to observe the Torah and its commandments. They extended their hands against their property and their daughters. They entered their sanctuary, wrought havoc within, and made the sacraments impure. The Jews suffered great difficulties from them, for they oppressed them greatly, until the God of our ancestors had mercy upon them, delivered them from their hand, and saved them. The sons of the Hasmoneim, the high priests, overcame them, slew them, and saved the Jews from their land. They appointed a king from the priests, and sovereignty returned to Israel for more than 200 years, until the destruction of the Second Temple, period. The Rambam in Mishnah Torah is split up into halachot, different sections, we'll call them. That's the end of the first section, the introductory section. Not at all in the Gemara, let me remind you. The whole context of the story, that they were after us spiritually, and the context of the story that the little bit was able to repel the great army. That's how Rambam starts. And then Rambam continues with what the Gemara says, but listen for some nuanced differences. And then the Rambam continues, Maimonides, that is. When the Jews overcame their enemies and destroyed them, they entered the sanctuary on the 25th of Kislev, and they couldn't find any pure oil. Except for one single cruse. It contained oil to burn for merely 1 day. They lit the arrangement of candles from it for 8 days, until they could crush olives and produce pure oil. By the way, now we're also getting, I'll just add, why 8 days? That's how long it took to make more oil. Okay. And now the Rambam says, accordingly, the sages of that generation ordained that these 8 days, which begin from the 25th of Kislev, should be commemorated to be days of happiness and praise of God. I'll just say the Hebrew. Yemei simcha v'halel. Let me remind you that the Gemara and Rashi and the Rif and the Torah and the Rami Rothenberg all said Halel v'hodea, days of praise and thanksgiving. Now we have days of joy and praise. Now the word simcha, I recognize I'm getting a little technical here, but stay with me. The Rami Rothenberg, when he said no parties, he said lo mishteve simcha. He said it is not about a like jovialness that comes with eating. And then the Rambam doesn't call it days of praise and thanksgiving. The Rambam calls it days of praise and jovialness and joy. So he's specifically emphasizing that which the Rambam Rothenberg didn't emphasize. I just want to observe the words here. Okay? Again, according to the sages of the generation, ordained that these 8 days, which begin from the 25th of Kislev, should be commemorated to be days of happiness and praise of God. Candles should be lit in the evening at the entrance to the houses on each and every one of these nights to leharot ulegalot hanes, to show and reveal the miracle. A variation on the famous Pirsumei Nisat to publicize the miracle. Obviously, in a certain sense, it's the same idea, but he chose different words, and we need to understand the meaning of these words. It doesn't say to publicize the miracle, it says to show and reveal. Reveal the miracle. What does it mean to reveal something? To reveal something means something was already there, and you are revealing it so that those who didn't see it was there can now see it was there. These days are called Chanukah. It's forbidden to eulogize and fast on them, as on the days of Purim. Lighting the candles on these is a rabbinic mitzvah. Okay. So now let's try to understand this. There's a lot going on here. First of all, the Rambam brings in the war and brings in the context. Second of all, he doesn't seem, and maybe I'm already teasing what I'm about to get to, but he doesn't seem to be talking about publicizing, like the point for Rambam, as opposed to the whole first approach, which was like, oh, we need to remember the supernatural miracle that happened and publicize it. That's not the case here. He's talking about the whole entire story, and then he says we need to reveal the miracle. Okay, let's understand. I'm not going to bring two more Rambams that Rav Shagar brought. And no one should think these are my ideas. These are ideas that I'm understanding that Rav Shagar brought. Okay. The Rambam, in Hilchot Megillah v'Chanukah, he writes about Purim and Hannukah, which are a joint because there are these two rabbinic holidays that were added later. He says, Mitzvat ner Hannukah, mitzvah chavivahi ad me'od. Sorry, I said I'd read in English. The mitzvah of the kindling the Hanukkah lamps is exceptionally dear. Beautiful phrase. Chaviva me'od. So beloved. It's sweet. It's such a good miracle. Such a good mitzvah. And a person should be very careful in their observance of making the miracle known. Again, not the words publicizing the miracle. Making the hodia hanes. Making known the miracle. And they must add as much, now the regular words from the Gemara, as much praise and thanksgiving on the miracles that were done for us. Even if they don't have any money for food, and they usually use charity, they need to pawn off or sell whatever they have, just enough just to be able to light oil to light a lamp. I'll remind you in the Gemara, it's enough, if economically this is the case, to just like one candle every single day. Okay. Let's listen again to Rambam. First of all, he says anew, on the miracles. Let me remind you about Rashi on the Rambam. The Gemara asked my Hannukah, and Rashi said on which miracle, which implicitly implied that he acknowledged there were multiple miracles, and only one of them was the reason that there was a holiday established. That's not what Rambam says. Rambam says al hanisim, the miracle, the holiday is to commemorate the miracles, which we need to make known. So which miracles is it? Presumably, it's all the miracles. It's the fact that they didn't kill our Jewishness, and it's the fact that we won this war that was super stacked against us, which, here we are, still in the midst of a war. I need not say explicitly because it is obvious that we are also in the midst of a miracle where we are a small thing defeating Iran and all of its proxies, and it's inconceivable what we've done as a small country. So anyway, the miracles, let's talk about that they didn't kill our Jewishness, and that we were able to learn in the caves, and they didn't catch us, and that the small defeated the many, and that there was this crazy thing with this little bit of oil. So Rambam seems to be, already there's a debate between Rambam and the rest, that Rambam thinks Hanukkah is about all of those miracles. But now I just want to remind you that when he talked about it, he didn't just say it was praise and thanksgiving. He also mentioned this joy which was specifically downplayed by the Rambam Rottenberg. So now we understand what a miracle is. What is Hanukkah according to the Rambam, according to Rav Shagar, as I understand it? The Rambam begins his book, his famous book, Mishnah Torah, with one of the first books, it's Yeshivat Torah, which is the foundations of being alive, frankly. And he says something interesting. I'll read it outside. I'll say it outside without even looking at the source. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu never did miracles so that the Jews would believe. Moshe only did miracles because he needed to do miracles. And then the Rambam continues, because a faith that is based on a miracle is insufficient. Because if it's based on something that happened, there could just be another explanation for why it happened. Or you could forget it happened. Right? I once heard, I don't know if this is true or not, that there was some research done that around the time that there was the splitting of the sea, there was a big tsunami that came. Right? So interesting question, like, the point, according to Rambam here, of splitting the sea was not so that the Jews would be like, wow, there's a God who split the sea for us and defeated the rules of nature because maybe they'd forget the next day. Which I have to now bring in, but I can't help but bring in Kierkegaard, a famous book called The Postscript to the Philosophical Fragments, writes about no matter how much of a profound faithful experience you have, you wake up the next morning and it's gone. Which really is also the first thing in Sichot Aram, which are the short pieces by Rabbi Nachman, in which he writes, Ki ani yadati ki gadol Hashem, commenting on the famous Tehillim, in which David HaMelech says, I knew. Why does it say I knew? Because you can't know. Because as soon as you cognate what happened and you put it into words, you're no longer in it. You can't know you're having a close connection to God, because as soon as you know it, you're already outside it looking at it. You can only experience it. You can only have known it. I knew. But frankly, once you knew, it doesn't sustain you. What sustains you is a real experience, not one that you cognitively know, but one that you emotionally feel. Sorry, bringing back Rabbi Nachman, bringing back Kierkegaard, bringing back to Rambam. Why did he split the sea? He split the sea because we needed to get past the water and the Egyptians were coming. And it was needed, and so it happened. Why, man? Because there was no food in the desert. You, listening to this video, who was a direct continuation of the people who are in the desert, who, if you ask me, means you're not really a distinct individual in those who are in the desert because you're a continuation of their souls. Is the fact that there was man really sustaining your religiosity? Did it even sustain the religiosity or the belief in God of those who are in the desert, who pretty quickly like take us back to Egypt? Miracles don't sustain. You forget. You chalk it up to something else. We needed food, so God gave us food. We needed to split the sea. We needed a sea split, so God split the sea. Again, in Dioma, what's going on right now, I was serving as a mechanic in the Air Force. I only did it for about a month in the war, and I happened to be doing it during the Iranian attack before Pesach. And I went back to the army base the next morning after we, blocked some 99% of their huge attack, and there was this unbelievable feeling of pride and gratitude for the miracle that was done. So now I need to ask you a question. Was the fact that our Air Force shot down 99% and that there was only one casualty, which is the whole world, frankly, even if it's a non-Jewish casualty, but they planned much, much greater destruction and they failed? So is that a miracle? No, it's not a miracle. It's an amazing Air Force that works extremely hard and trains all of its people for many, many years and has a top-notch technology. And we did that. Or if I can quote Coach Carter, I wrote that play. That was me. Right? It wasn't a miracle. Of course it was a miracle. Do you want me to get into the mechanism by which it was a miracle? That none of our I don't know, rocket launchers jammed, and that none of the planes crashed, and that we were able to detect all the radar, and the fact that we have a tremendously brilliant people in our people who are able to do that. So all that was God and was a miracle? No, that was thanks to us. But obviously that was a miracle. And I guess I'm just challenging the binary, frankly. And that is what I think that Rav Shagar thinks that Rambam is after. So now I want to read a few verses by Rav Shagar, and with that I'm going to close. Not verses, quotes. Rav Shagar. A miracle, as a proof, functions like a gun held to the temple, and it forces a person to acknowledge the existence of a supernatural power. But such an external coercion cannot bring one to faith, because faith is a direct encounter with the presence of the divine. Presence of the divine. God as present. Supernatural means God is outside. That's not present. Faith is based on God's presence in your life, not on the way God outside of life can sort of shake up the rules of life. Writes Rav Shagar. And then Rav Shagar writes, the love and dearness, right, back to Chavivut. I remember the Rambam said that Hannukah is a very dear miracle. A very dear mitzvah. The love and the dearness between a person and God, when you're close to God, when you feel God, when you see God, they naturally bring one to publicize God's praises. Amidst the masses. Starting again, the love and dearness between a person and God naturally brings one to publicize God and to praise them amidst the masses. And in the context of Chanukah, this is given expression with publicizing of this miracle. Let's go back to Rambam for a second. Rambam said to show and reveal the miracle. Rambam said Chanukah is beautiful because it's a holiday that you make known the miracle. If according to Rashi, the Rif the Torah, the whole first way that we explained it, we need to remember the miracle. For the Rambam, we need to remember that it was a miracle. The fact that we were able to win that war, the Chashmonim win that war, it was probably because of really good battle plans by the Chashmonim. The Rambam says, remember that that was also a miracle. Right? The oil could last like, whoa, there was this crazy coincidence. Remember that that was a miracle. It's to remember that these things are miracles, or in other words, it's to realize that they're miracles. It's to see that they're miracles. And so what does it mean when we light a candle and we call our lighting of the candle a publicizing of the miracle? We're publicizing that what happened was a miracle. More than the fact that we're saying a miracle happened, we're saying, you see that thing that happened? That was a miracle. What does it mean to light a candle? It's to say, there are miracles. And when you sit, as I really encourage you to sit in front of your Hanukkah candle for 30 minutes and watch it burn, to watch this thing, which is a light and a particle, so it's not a light and it's not a particle, and if Purim was all about the physicality, this is about a light, which a light is not physical, because it's not really there, because you can put your finger through it, but it is there. That's a miracle. Light is a miracle. And when you remember, oh my gosh, that crazy story that happened back then, it wasn't just a history story. It's not something that happened in history. It was a miracle. When you light your Hanukkah candles, what you're saying is that I want to make known that that thing that happened in history was a miracle. I want it to be known that what happened against Iran was a miracle. Hanukkah is about seeing that things are miracles. It's not seeing the miracles, because let me tell you a secret. You see the miracles. Love between you and your family. You're seeing miracles all of the time. But do you see that they are miracles? That's what Hanukkah is. And Hanukkah, it's about in life seeing that life is miracles. Hanukkah is about realizing that life is miraculous. Right? And that's why the Rambam writes that the opportunity to do that during Hanukkah right now is through Hanukkah. Because we remember a story and we say, you know what, that was a miracle. And that reminds us to see other things as a miracle. I'm going to close with a line by Rav Shagar. Rambam opposes bringing a miracle as a proof for faith. He does not believe in Hashem because he believes in a miracle. Rather the opposite. He believes in miracles because he believes in Hashem. Again, we don't believe in Hashem because there are miracles. We believe in miracles because we believe in Hashem. When you infuse your life with God, when you see and feel the God all around you, suddenly you're able to see the miracle of the fact that you're alive. Suddenly you're able to see and call everything that's happening around you with God's orienting hand, to call it a miracle. To know that all of the parts of the Hanukkah story were miracles. To know all of the parts of the war we're in are miracles. To know that you and your family are miracles. To know that your life is a miracle. And Hanukkah is the opportunity to say, I believe in God, and thus I choose to see things as miracles. I want to close by giving you a blessing, and please give me the blessing too. That this year, when you sit opposite your Hanukkah candles, that you notice the miraculous nature of light. That for one sec you don't take for granted that you're alive. That the most amazing fact in existence is that there's existence at all. That you look at historical stories as miracles. I want to give you the deepest bracha. That you know that whenever there is darkness, there is a little bit of light that can spread eightfold. To know that in this dark, hard time of a war we're fighting in Israel, and a war we're fighting on all fronts, and a war we're fighting against anti-Semitism, and a war we're fighting against our Jewishness, that the miracle is that there will always be one jug of oil and it will never go out. And to know that if you just release it from the jug, it can burn eightfold until you can make another jug of oil. There can be light in the darkness. There are those of our people, hopefully between when I record this video and when this video is released, this will no longer be the case, but there are our brothers and sisters who are ensnared in darkness under the ground, that there may be a miracle of light for them in the darkness. That out of this dark war comes light. And I want to give you the blessing that you look in the mirror and know that Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, that the candle of God is the soul of the individual, that you are light and that you are a miracle. You look at the candles, remember to see that.